HVAC 360 is brought to you today by Metrics Construction Supplements. Does it feel like your job just isn't measuring up to your expectations? Is your work week longer than your coworkers? Then it's time to grab yourself a snack pack of Metrics Construction Supplements. These lab-tested and LEED-approved little green beauties temporary but totally eliminate your ability to measure anything. How big is that foot-long hot dog? How should I know? You want those studs 16 inches on center? Speak English, man. You need this done by next week? You use funny words. Visit your medical professional to see if Metrics Construction Supplements are right for you and get them today. Side effects may include dizziness, vomiting, chest pain, frequent and or vicious diarrhea, kidney stones, reduction in height, elongation of fingernails, barking, panting, fetching, headaches, and in most cases, a slight lean. Patients should also not work, eat, sleep, or operate any machinery. Honestly, we thought this was a great medication, but on second thought, you should probably just give this a hard pass and not consume this product under any circumstances. Hey, what's up? Welcome back. This is episode number 119. Matt Nelson here, your host for HVAC 360, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. How do we do that? We do that by sharing lessons learned for people in the field and talking with industry experts. But we don't really stop there. I want to encourage you to double down on your weekly dose of HVAC knowledge by hopping on over to HVAC360.com and joining my growing community of people just like you. And as an added bonus for joining the list, you're going to be one of the first to get notified of free webinar series that I'm launching here in early 2019. There will only be 100 spots available for each webinar, so it's going to be a list that's developed first come, first served basis. So what's up for this week? This week we are going to be talking with the chair of the Certified HVAC Designer Exam Subcommittee, Mr. Mark Fly. We're going to talk a little bit about who this certification is for, what it means to make an exam, and some of the other things that you should know. And really, it's a really interesting stuff. So let's cut to the tape. All right, today we're talking with Mark Fly, PE, who's a ASHRAE fellow, and he's also the executive director of NAIC. What's that, you ask? It's AAON's new R&D lab. So how you doing today, Mark?
Doing real good.
Fantastic. Now, you are the chair of the Certified HVAC Designer Exam Subcommittee, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so I guess let's back up a little bit. What does it mean to have a certification as opposed to a certificate?
Well, a certificate generally means that you've attended some kind of course or class, and you successfully completed that class, which may or may not involve a test at the end. But it's really an educational session, an educational event. A certification, on the other hand, it really is an assessment, and it's trying to validate that the professional has competence, knowledge, and skills needed to successfully complete a certain job or a certain performance, in an area. So the difference really is, have you gone through the class and you completed it, or do you have experience and have you proven competence in those skills that maybe that class taught you?
Right. So they're two terms that sound very similar but are extremely different.
That's correct.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the newest ASHRAE certification and how it differs really from the other certifications?
Well, the Certified HVAC Designer is really the fundamental certification for doing HVAC design work, which for the people in the consulting industry is really core to their business. So the idea of this certification came out of the 2016 ASHRAE member survey, where there were about 1,900 respondents. 95% of the people that responded stated that competence in HVAC designers was varied greatly, and about 81% said there was a great need for qualified HVAC designers. So So, that kind of started the ball rolling. The ASHRAE Certification Committee determined that there was a need. And we believed that, we believe that PEs, or people, registered professional engineers who are doing HVAC design, will pursue this because that's really what they do. But the idea behind the certification is that it's geared so that non-PE or non-degreed designers, maybe someone who has come up through the ranks and has worked their way into doing HVAC design, that they can take the certification, achieve the certification, and prove competence in that area. The intent was that even these HVAC designers in most areas are going to be working under a licensed registered professional engineer. In areas where that law and that requirement is. So, we really, as we developed the exam, we wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to replace a PE test. That certainly is not what we're trying to achieve. We're looking to assess and qualify anyone, regardless of their degree program or their competence to do HVAC design. So,
right,
it could be a young engineer that takes the class. It could be a draftsman that spent 20 years in the trade and is now doing design.
Right, and I think this is one of the it's a core, one of the core fundamentals, like you said, the fundamental certification that ASHRAE has now produced. I've known both you and I we're professional engineers. And I at least have had, experience knowing guys who had, a lot of experience that have grown up just doing HVAC design, have been really experienced, but just really didn't have any sort of way to, telegraph or issue on their resume to say that they really know how to, design HVACs. HVACs, that's not a thing, but anyway, you know what I mean. But
yep.
To the counterpoint, I've also known PEs that just have the brand new PEs, 4 years of experience they took and passed the exam, but yet they don't have as nearly as much design experience as that person who's been in the industry for 20 years. They don't have that. So it's I guess a sort of an equalizer. It's a way for people who want to prove their competence in HVAC design, and for those people to actually get some sort of recognition, some sort of title, right, when they really didn't have anything to really get before.
Yeah, and it also allows the principals of those HVAC design firms to, recognize and assess their employees, those designers that are coming up. So, if you're looking at a new hire or you're setting professional development goals for someone inside your organization, this is a tool to use for that.
So now, what exactly was your? I know you're the chair of the exam committee. What does that mean, and how did you actually get that spot?
Well, I sat on the ASHRAE certification, which is a standing committee under Publishing and Education Council. So it's one of the many roles I've served in ASHRAE through the years. And so the chair is the person that works with the oversight committee, the certification committee, to develop it. All the rest of the members are not members of that. So my job is really to ensure that we have followed all the ANSI and ISO processes, that we have a valid, reliable, fair examination, and that everyone on the development committee reaches a consensus in regards to the scope and the eligibility requirements and the difficulty of the test.
Right. Now, I guess how does one go about selecting the members of the subcommittee? So you're chairing it. How do people get on this thing?
Well, we sent out a call for members, got a lot of responses, and the certification committee had a subcommittee that selected those, and so we looked at everyone's experience, their biographical information, and we ended up picking about 15 members, including myself. And all the other members are practicing either design build engineers or consulting engineers. And, and I went through, when I knew I was going to do this, I went through the resumes and stuff. I counted up about 460 years of experience in those 14 people sitting on this committee, and the average experience of the committee members 30 years. So we also spent a lot of time when we did the selection to make sure that not only did we select people from North America, U.S. and Canada, but that we also paid attention to international members and to gender. So we have a good mix, very broad mix of people developing the test.
And why do you feel that was important to include? I mean, obviously, ASHRAE is an international organization, but can you just talk about why that's so important to get that perspective?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of interest internationally in this certification also. About 25% of the people that responded to our development survey were international members. So ASHRAE is an international society. We want to make sure we serve all the membership. And plus people are, working in the U.S. or working around the world. So what we found as we did our research is that the practices and the knowledge isn't different in the U.S. and Canada than it is anywhere else. There are codes and standards that change a little bit, but the fundamentals are all there.
The laws of physics don't change from place to place.
The laws of physics don't change. Yeah.
So now you've got the green light from the committee. You've gotten your exam subcommittee all set. What are sort of the next steps that take place in creating one of these exams?
Well, so kind of the process we go through is, first we review and collect all the background area, what we call the body of knowledge. What documents, what information are essential to doing HVAC design that every designer needs to know. And then from that and from the committee, we create a very large task list of all the things that we think an HVAC designer does. And this was a very long list. That list gets turned into a survey, and we sent the survey out, and we've got about 1,200 responses from 60 different countries. Like I said, about 25% of them were non-U.S. And these responders come back and say, okay, this is important, this is very important, this is not very important from our standpoint. So once we have this massive amount of survey data, we spent a lot of time doing extensive analysis. And with the survey data, we also had the demographics. We saw where they were coming from. We assessed whether they were an employer, whether they were a registered professional engineer or a designer or a contractor or design build contractor, and weighed all that to put together basically our test specifications and the list of required subject matter that we needed for the test. The next step that we've just completed was we sent all the members of the committee went through extensive training, and we're working with a outside testing partner, PSI AMP, who are experts in this ANSI ISO process of how to develop fair, unbiased tests. They train us on how to write questions and how the questions have to be formed. We create this big bank of questions, and at the moment, we're in the next couple of months, we're just going to go start working with them and going through and reviewing all the test questions and make sure this all goes together. So there's many test questions we pick from that pool, randomly different ones that put on tests. But it's a very complex and extensive process if you follow the ISO, ANSI standards to put these together.
So now a lot of this information that the steps that you went through, that is actually contained now, very exciting, is contained in the guidebook, the Candidate Guidebook that has just been released. If you're listening to this live, we're about mid-February. So now it's like the first part of February it was released. So I guess what is in that guidebook specifically, and how can you get a hold of it?
Well, you can get, it's on the ASHRAE website. If you go on the ASHRAE website, go under the Professional Development tab, you'll find certification types, and then there's a CHD or Certified HVAC Designer place to click. And if you click one more, it downloads that guidebook for you. So you get this guidebook, and the guidebook describes, how to apply for the test. It describes what the qualifications are. We have some depending on your education level, some experience level, some minimum qualifications that we feel people need to have before they set for the test. And then there's a list basically of all the categories of these questions that I just described before. So you can get some flavor for what kind of questions and what kind of subjects are going to be addressed.
Right, so there's actually an exam blueprint that kind of talks about the difficulty level of the test, the difficulty level of the questions, and then what type of categories that you're going to expect to see on the test, correct?
Right.
So now, I guess, talking about some of the things, what were some of the big discussions in the amongst the committee regarding the direction of the certification?
Well, I mean, probably the biggest one that we spent a lot of time on was basically the scope of the test. We want to make sure that this is not, we're not proposing this as a PE replacement. So getting the test focused and scope focused at the right job applicant. We're not preventing PEs from taking the test, but we're really trying to focus on the designers and not that. The other part that kind of goes with that is the rigor of the test. How hard are the questions? How much how practical versus theoretical the questions should be. Those kind of things. And and make sure that the test is focused on an HVAC designer, not necessarily on an HVAC design engineer, and drawing that distinction. So that was a lot of the discussion that went on. We were also very careful as we went through to make sure, and our international partners on the committee also made sure of this, that we didn't become U.S. centric, that we weren't referring to U.S. codes and standards, that we were just talking about best practices and keeping everything focused, basically using ASHRAE standards, handbooks, and other publications, things that are universally available to people for the subject matter of the test.
So now, and again, this is geared. It's not towards professional engineers, but it is kind of an in between. It's not necessarily an entry level certification. It is a certification where once you've been a designer for a little bit, your stuff, and you can sit for the exam.
Right.
So it's technically, and I look at some of the work experience or the eligibility requirements, and they actually look different than, say, some of the other certifications that you have for high performance buildings or certified healthcare design. Those are a lot more stringent. They expect you to have a lot more knowledge for those
right.
exams than this one.
Yeah, those are real specialists, and this is more of a generalist. In the HVAC field. So, if you might get the CHD before you went and became a certified hospital designer, that just wasn't how we happened to develop the certifications at ASHRAE. But I'm kind of glad that we did wait, because I think we learned a lot in the specialist certification that we could apply to this certification as we went along. So.
So now, I guess one of the questions that I know has to come up is just looking at some of the resources. If you look at the guidebook, you have some publications that you expect people to be familiar with and to be able to learn from. And I got to admit, if they've listed 3 of the 4 handbooks that ASHRAE has, and ASHRAE Standard 55, 62.1, 92.1, some commissioning standards, and the International Mechanical Code. That's quite a bit. That's a laundry list. How do you is that too much? Is that enough, or how do you see those?
Well, I mean, these are tools that if you're an HVAC designer, you use every day. So, we're not looking for people to memorize the HVAC applications handbook by any stretch of the imagination. But, we're really looking at practical knowledge. The standard of care of doing HVAC design is defined in those documents that we listed. So, I don't want people to be too intimidated by the list of documents, think I have to read all these things cover to cover. But if you're a designer, you should be in there, or you're likely to be in there a lot from time to time, looking at different aspects. If you need to know how to size ductwork or how to size pipe or what, different things are all contained in those documents. So like I said, it's we needed to list resources to say these are the things that are covered, but we're not going to go so deep to say what's in chapter 42 on page 26 kind of thing.
Right. So it might be more useful to look at that exam blueprint, the Appendix A of the guidebook, to look and kind of see, can I, like Item 1, system design, line item A, it says supply or size, supply, return, and exhaust ducts. So if you can do that, great.
And you can go to the ASHRAE handbook of fundamentals, and the information on how to do that is in there.
Yep.
If you don't know.
So you can kind of go down the list. It might be more useful, I guess. What I'm saying is that work off the exam blueprint rather than reading all the the tomes that you have listed in the resources. So all right. So I guess I know we talked about it a little bit before, but why is it? I mean, you see exams out there that are more of a course and a test. Now this is, and this kind of muddles the water because we talked about it before, where a certificate, it's exactly kind of, you take a course and you get a certificate. But, I know that there are exams out there where you actually, sit for a 3 or 4 day course, and then there is the last day you take a test. Why is that? I guess how does ASHRAE differentiate itself by not doing that?
Well, this all goes back to, actually that is forbidden by the ANSI process, and the idea is we're trying to assess someone's capabilities, not necessarily their ability to regurgitate something you just heard or learned, and that you may or may not retain. We want to assess. We're trying to assess your understanding. So that's the idea behind it. But, if you have an ANSI accredited and we get audited and reviewed by ANSI to make sure that we keep our accreditation on this certification, you cannot teach the test. So it's very important that to us, there are many ASHRAE resources that have components and knowledge that could help you pass that test, and I'm not saying that any of them would be detrimental. It would be a good idea to take a lot of them, especially as a young designer or someone who's striving to get to this point. But we're not going to give you a course that teaches you specifically what the questions on the test are. That wouldn't be an assessment of your ability.
Right, and I think to that point, not only are you not, if you went to the ASHRAE website, you're not going to see a HVAC or a certified HVAC designer prep course.
Right.
and especially I think ANSI talks about the kind of it's you have the exam development and you have an educational component, and they're not supposed to be intermingled at all. Is that right?
Right. We do not work with the professional development committee to develop courses for our tests at all. I mean, for our certifications at all.
Now, I guess to also point out, the one thing I guess that you do have and you do produce is a practice exam. So there is some practice questions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there are practice questions to kind of give you the flavor and give you the and they will be derived from the question writing exercise that the committee members are doing right now. So it's really to kind of give you an idea of what the rigor of the test is going to be. How hard is this going to be? Am I ready yet to take this, to go for this certification? So, just so people don't walk in completely unaware of what they're walking into.
Right. And I think it does give a good idea of how typically the questions are worded, or what they look like.
Right.
So now just kind of some nuts and bolts of the exam. I know that in the past the exams have been 2 hours, and now they've bumped them up. They've added a half an hour for that. Can you explain? There's 115 multiple choice questions on the exam, but your score is only based on 100 of them. What's right. Where's the extra 15 go?
The other 15 are trial questions, things that the committee and the development people are using to, and they're looking at people's pass rates and scores and the demographics of the people taking the test, and seeing if this is a good candidate to include in our question pool, because we want to maintain a large question pool for this test, so that we can. If someone takes the test and needs to retake the test, they don't get the same test again. So there again, going back to, we're trying to assess your skills, not your ability to remember a particular question or something. And so they're putting these 15 trial questions in there just as a vetting method to make sure that we're doing that. In addition to the 2.5 hours, if you're a non-native English speaker, you're allowed 30 minutes extra on the test, because a lot of people have a little more trouble with they just operate a little slower if they're not English speakers.
Right, and I think that from the exams that I've seen in the past, there are some questions that are a little bit wordy.
Yes.
So technically, the harder questions are wordier, and so that's kind of a drawback to anybody who's not a non-native English speaker.
Right. So we've given them some extra time, and that was worked through with ANSI, our accreditor, and it took some work on the committee's part and data. Looking at test scores and looking at our pass rates for international non-native versus English speakers to justify that. So it's one of the things we've been able to include lately.
Right, and I know that in talking with some of the people at ASHRAE, it was important for non-native English speakers to be able to take the test and get the ASHRAE certification. They weren't necessarily interested in getting a certification that might have been only for Spanish-speaking countries or only for a certain demographic. They wanted the ASHRAE certification. Yeah,
ASHRAE has a very high prestige around the world. Having worked with many of the international people over the years, it's amazing what a set of ASHRAE handbooks on somebody's desk in some of these places is worth. It's almost worth more than their degree.
So I guess if you are, what are some of the upcoming milestones now that you've published the Candidate Guidebook? What can people expect in the upcoming months?
Okay, the exam development committee right now, kind of coming up. We're just finishing up the exam. In the next few weeks, we're going to finalize items. The applications for the exam are going to open on March 1st, and the computer-based exam will launch worldwide on June 3rd. And then the first, what we call paper and pencil test, the first live test, will actually be given at the ASHRAE meeting, annual meeting in Kansas City this summer. So,
okay.
But your first opportunity to take the test at one of the testing centers is on June 3rd.
Okay. Now, and I know that right out of the gate, they don't necessarily give you a pass-fail for some of the first exams. Is that right? Because there's some things that you have to do prior to that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to go online. You have to submit your application and your qualifications. Once you're approved for that, which takes about 5 days to get that approval, you need to set for that exam within the next 90-day eligibility time. So those are kind of the requirements as you go in. But you do have to submit your qualifications so that we can review those, make sure that you meet the qualifications of the certification.
Okay, so and that's some of the sign-up process that they're going to have to go through and get approved. Yeah, and again, all this is really explained in the guidebook, along with some of the fees. So right now, I think there's some fees listed in the guidebook. Those are probably going to change and get updated once we get through some of this preliminary stuff. Because I noticed that there were some discounts.
Yeah, I mean the ASHRAE fees are reviewed by the certification committee every year, so they all can change a little bit. But for ASHRAE members right now it's $395, and for non-members it's $545. If you do not pass it the first time, there's a very deep discount. You can retake the exam. For members $175, and for non-members $225. So. So one of the things that it's worthwhile being an ASHRAE member, maybe even joining ASHRAE to take the test. You also get, as part of that, you get access to the ASHRAE handbook online, which includes those four handbooks that are listed in the as part of the resources or the body of knowledge. So.
Right. So I guess assuming they pass the exam, it's not just, okay, I passed the exam, I'm good. What are some of the things that people can expect to have to maintain? Because there is a maintenance process for the exam.
So to maintain your certification, basically the certification is good for 3 years, and on the third year, by December 31st, you have to renew your certification. The really purpose of that is you want to demonstrate that the continuing competence that you're learning as you go along, that you're building in your career. So to maintain your certification, you have to do at least one HVAC design project, which if you're an HVAC designer, we would hope you do. You need 30 hours of professional development, and up to 15 of which can be earned through having completed additional HVAC design projects. And you have to comply with the code of ethics that's listed in the guide. So there's a code of ethics around the HVAC designer certification also. So those are the things you need to do to renew every 3 years. So the expectation is that you're going to keep up to date on the latest information as it develops.
Okay, so it's not as onerous as the in the U.S. the PE exam to become the continuing education for the PE is about 15 credit hours a year. So this ends up being like 10 credit hours a year plus some experience. Right, and a lot of it can be done in your daily work. So okay, fantastic. Half of that. So fantastic. Well, we talked a lot about covered a lot of topics on this certification. Anything that you think that we need to cover before we close out? Sure. I mean, I can't express to you how much excitement is around this certification program in the ASHRAE community and the people I know. That we really think this is probably going to be one of the most popular
certification programs that we've released. We feel like this is going to bring a great benefit to not only the designer but also their employers, so that it adds a level of value to the person that achieves this certification, and it lets your employer, your peers, and your customers, kind of know that you have some level of competence in what you're doing. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of excitement around it. We're really looking forward to getting this out. There's been a lot of work go in up to this point by the exam committee, and I am very impressed with the guys sitting on that committee. I can't say enough about them. They've really dug in there and worked hard on this.
Excellent. Well, Mark, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this certification. Best of luck to the certification. I'm excited about it. When I saw the Candidate Guidebook come out, I was stoked. Seeing that. So I really appreciate you coming on, and thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to Mark Fly for taking the time to sit down and chat with us. Check out the show notes for other things and links mentioned in the interview. You can find that over at the show notes page at HVAC360.com/119. All right. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this is helpful. If you know somebody who needs this type of information, and frankly, anybody who is looking to take their career up to the next level and get a certification, this is a great one to get. It's really something that you can shoot for, even if they're not looking to get a certification. I think if you go to the guidebook, and we talked a little bit about this in the interview, but if you go to the guidebook and you look at the things that HVAC designers should know how to do, you can kind of give yourself a mental score on saying, okay, I'm doing good on this area. Hey, I need to make up some stuff in this area. This is an area of focus that I should concentrate on, and you can kind of grade yourself like that. It might be just as simple as that. So if you know somebody that needs some kind of information like that, go ahead and pass this along. All right. If you're not a subscriber, consider joining the list of people just like you over at HVAC360.com for some more weekly goodness. And if you wouldn't mind, I would be greatly appreciative of anyone leaving me a rating review on Apple Podcasts. This helps spread the word, and I'd greatly appreciate it. Hey, one last thing. If you didn't know, and you are a YouTube junkie, we are now issuing and putting our podcasts on YouTube. So you can go ahead, go over to YouTube. The HVAC 360 is the channel, and why don't you subscribe? If you've taken enough time to go check us out, just hit subscribe, and you're going to get notifications on when the new podcasts show up. So it's just something great. Give me a comment. Give me some feedback there. That's all regular YouTube stuff, so I'd greatly appreciate it. Well, that's a wrap for this week of HVAC 360. I'm Matt Nelson, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. And as always, know what you build and share what you know.